Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from legal expert Michael Joseph. I'm Matt Skye. Michael is a seasoned attorney with over 20 years of experience in personal injury, commercial litigation, and criminal defense. Based in Manhattan and White Plains, New York, Michael is committed to social justice and providing accessible legal representation for all. Michael, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump in. I've read that there's a growing number of car accident cases in New York State. Can you elaborate on this more for us?
This year and last year, the numbers have been higher than the prior years as COVID is weighing down. More people are out and about. More people are walking on the streets. Manhattan especially is busier than ever. You see people walking, taking the trains. People are out and about. And that's corresponded to a higher number of both car accidents and pedestrians getting hit by cars.
And with regard to that, what are the most common types of injuries you're seeing these days?
Injuries, well, we see all kinds of injuries. We're seeing a lot of fractures from people being hit by cars while crossing the streets. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of knee injuries, a lot of shoulder injuries. For example, when people get hit by a car, it's not only the initial impact of the car that gets hurt. A lot of times they're thrown or they fall onto the ground. There's all kinds of twisting injuries, especially with the knees, or they fall down onto like an outstretched hand, for example. So you'll see a lot of wrist injuries or elbow injuries or even shoulder injuries from people trying to brace themselves from the impact after being hit by a car. And certainly with car accidents, is always, with the forward and backward motion, when you're going at a rate that's commensurate with the speed of a vehicle, then all of a sudden the vehicle hits something, comes to a sudden stop. Obviously, you're getting thrown forward and backwards, and we're even seeing more airbag injuries, because as airbags are getting a little bit more sensitive, the airbags themselves cause injuries like nasal fractures and burns. Burns are a big one. You're seeing a lot more burns from airbags these days. And also, when people are at a stop and they're hit from behind, what happens is they get thrown backwards and forwards. So you're seeing a lot of neck, a lot of back injuries. Those are really the main types of injuries we're seeing with motor vehicle accidents and pedestrians knockdowns or pedestrians who are hit by cars.
That's interesting what you're saying with the airbags. That almost sounds kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because on one hand, the airbags are saving lives. At the same time, they're actually causing injuries in and of themselves.
That's correct. But you have to pick your poison sometimes. So I'd rather have a little bit of a burn rather than a broken neck. That being said, when you do have an airbag burn or an airbag secondary injury, such as a fractured nose, the driver that caused the accident is still responsible for those injuries, even though they're somewhat one step removed from the accident, because that's the trigger of the airbag, is the driver's negligence. So when the other driver's at fault and you have an airbag injury, you can still sue the driver for the injury. You can't always sue the manufacturer because there's nothing inherently wrong with the airbag if it deploys when it's supposed to deploy. If it deploys when it's not supposed to deploy, then you might have a claim against the manufacturer of the vehicle. But in general, where the airbags are doing their job and stopping you from a harder impact, the incidental injury is part and parcel of the personal injury case against the driver of the other vehicle.
Would you say most of the time it's the driver, not the manufacturer?
Well, I'd say most of the time, yeah. Most of the time, it's the driver that causes the accident in the first place. It's somewhat rare to have airbags deploy when they're not supposed to deploy. Obviously, if an airbag deploys and there's no reason for the airbag to deploy that causes an injury, then potentially the manufacturer is going to be liable, because the airbags are supposed to be triggered when there's a sudden deceleration in the movement of the vehicle. If there's a sudden explosion of the airbag, when there's no sudden deceleration, and that causes an injury, potentially there might be a defect there.
So when someone is injured in a car wreck, what are the first steps someone should take?
The first question everyone wants to know when they're injured in a car accident is, who's going to pay my medical bills? Or if I'm out of work and I can't work, for example, if you're a construction worker or a laborer and you have an injury that prevents you from working, who's going to pay you? Who's going to pay you while you're out? Those are the first questions everybody who's injured in a car accident has. In New York, it's somewhat counterintuitive, and it depends on kind of what your status is. Meaning, are you a driver? Are you a pedestrian? Are you something else? So the general rule in New York is if you're injured in the car, even if the other side is at fault, your own vehicle has to pay your medical insurance. Your own vehicle's insurance company has to provide your medical benefits and wage benefits. And then later on, your own insurance company will go after the other driver for reimbursement. But that's sort of New York's way of making sure anybody who's injured gets treated regardless of fault. So New York doesn't want people fighting over who's at fault and getting delayed in medical treatment. So The rule in New York is if you're in a vehicle, the car insurance company that covers the car that you are in has to pay your medical bills. However, if you're a pedestrian and you get hit by a car, then the car that hit you, their insurance company has to pay your medical bills and lost wages. And it's a little bit tricky because you have to file a no-fault application within 30 days. And sometimes if you're hit by a car and taken to the hospital, you have no idea who's supposed to pay your medical bills. That's why you need an experienced personal injury lawyer, because what we do is we get the police report, we look at the insurance codes, we figure out who the insurance company is, and we can get an application done, usually within a day, to make sure that people who are hit by cars are covered. Now also, when it comes to buses and bus accidents, it's even a little bit more nuanced, because if you're on a bus that's involved in a motor vehicle accident and you have your own insurance, what happens? You have to go through your own insurance company first, even though your own car wasn't involved in the vehicle. Or if it's a car in your household, like your mother or your father's car, you have to go through their insurance, even though you were on the bus. It's only when you don't own a vehicle or there's nobody in your household that has a vehicle that you can then make the application to the bus company's insurance company. And that's who pays the medical bills. The next question everyone asks after a car accident is, do I have a lawsuit? Well, the lawsuit depends on who was at fault for the accident. This is generally determined by looking at New York's vehicle and traffic law and the rules of the road. Basically, anybody that violated the rules of the road is at fault and can be sued for causing the accident, depending on what kind of injury you have. New York has a kind of a crazy rule saying you need to have a serious injury to be able to sue. And what that means in English is either a fracture, an objectively verified injury that causes some limitations, loss of fetus, or a disfigurement, or really any injury that keeps you out of work or out of school for 90 days or more. So generally even if the other party is completely at fault, if you don't have an injury that's objectively verified, you still can't sue, which a lot of people think is unfair. But that's the way it is in New York.
So to clarify, and I think you may have brushed on this a little bit, if someone gets hit by another vehicle, are they automatically at fault in New York State?
Usually the driver has some fault. New York is a comparative state where to be able to sue, you don't have to show the other side is 100% fault. But generally where a vehicle hits a pedestrian, there's some fault on the part of the vehicle because New York's vehicle and traffic law, especially Section 1146, requires that all vehicles exercise reasonable care to avoid hitting a pedestrian. Okay. Now, the most common scenario we see where the driver of the vehicle is definitely at fault is crosswalk accidents. So, for example, when a vehicle has a green light, the pedestrians to his right or to his left, or to the driver's right or to the driver's left, also have the right way to walk. They also have the walk signal. So typically, a lot of drivers don't realize this, but when they're turning, both the pedestrian and the vehicle have green lights. So under New York law, the vehicle has to yield the right of way. So the pedestrians have the right of way over a turning vehicle. So a lot of times people will just see, green light, and start turning and hit a pedestrian. Well, they're at fault because they violated the vehicle and traffic law. So we've won case after case on summary judgment, where before even going to a trial, we've had the courts look at the motion papers and look at how the accident happened to see action. This driver turned, the pedestrian had the right of way, they hit the pedestrian, the driver's at fault. That's a slam dunk case. So if you're walking in a crosswalk with the light in your favor and then you get hit by a vehicle that turned, they're definitely at fault.
So to clarify, if a vehicle were to hit someone, can that someone still sue even if the driver had a green light?
That someone can sue always, especially if the driver had a green light, because whenever the driver has a green light, the pedestrian also has the walk signal. So if a driver is turning, because he's turning, he's going from one street onto another street, the driver who's turning has the obligation to make sure the intersection is clear of pedestrians before he starts his turn. In other words, the driver of a bus, a truck, whatever, can't make a turn while there's still pedestrians in the crosswalk or so close that he's going to make contact with them, because it's the driver's responsibility to avoid hitting a pedestrian.
Gotcha. So what is the danger to your car accident injury case if you don't seek medical attention immediately?
The biggest danger to a car accident or a personal injury case, if you don't seek medical attention, is just lack of documentation. You can sit home and say, "Oh, it hurts," but the courts aren't going to buy that. You have to have a objectively verified injury to be able to sue at all. And even if I filed a case and said this person is terribly injured, they're sitting at home, they can't get out of bed, without some medical documentation documenting what the injury is and why it's causing you to be limited or why it's causing your pain, you have no case. So really, if you don't go seek medical treatment after a car accident, you're really doing yourself a double disservice, because one, you're still going to have the injury. It's not getting treated. You're probably going to get worse. And two, when you do file a lawsuit, you're not going to be able to prove your case. You're not going to be able to prove what injuries you have. And, the longer you wait to see a doctor, or the longer you try to delay and think you're fine or it's just going to heal on its own and don't see treatment, when it does turn out to be more serious than you originally thought, or when it does turn out to have some permanency, the insurance companies and the judges are going to turn around and say, hey, you weren't that badly hurt because you didn't go to the doctor. Or they're going to try and dispute causation and say, if this injury was really from this accident, well, then you would have went to the doctor sooner. You wouldn't have waited weeks or a month or whatever. So really, you're doing yourself a disservice. The no-fault benefits are there. They're there for you to get treatment. That's what they're there for. So if you're afraid your insurance rates are going to go up, or you get delayed seeking treatment, you're really doing yourself a disservice.
So how should people pay for their medical bills while their personal injury case is ongoing?
In the case of a car accident, for example, the medical insurance is there for you. That's what the no-fault benefits are. Basically, you see the doctor is billing the insurance company directly. In the case of, let's say, a construction accident, if you have ongoing medical treatment, there's workers' comp. Usually, by law, there's supposed to be workers' comp, even though not every employer carries it. They're supposed to. But in general, you're entitled, if you get hurt at work, you're entitled to workers' compensation benefits. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about a kind of a new thing that's coming up, or a new scenario we're seeing. Uber, Lyft, food delivery guys. It's kind of nuanced now. So under New York, if you get hurt while you're driving a person in Uber or Lyft, as long as you're on the app, you're an employee. You get workers' compensation. If you're not on the app and you're just driving around, you get no fault. Now, if you're on a bicycle, for example, or if you're doing an Uber Eats, you're not covered by the liberty laws, and now you're an independent contractor, which means if you're in a car and you get hit by another vehicle while you're doing Uber Eats because you don't have a person in the car, or you're not doing the equivalent of a taxi or ride share, now you have to go through no fault. Same thing if you're on a bike. If you're a bike, even if you're on the app, even if you're transporting food for Uber Eats, you're still technically an independent contractor because the liberty laws don't apply to bicycles. So if you get hit by a car, now you have to go through no fault. And because you're a bicyclist, you have to go through the no fault of the car that hit you. So New York's laws in terms of who pays for medical bills are a quandary. It's like a trout for the unwary. That's really why when you do get to an accident in New York, you don't want to get stuck on these medical bills. You want to be able to get the treatment. That's why you really need to see an attorney or consult with an attorney who has experience handling these cases and knows the ins and outs, because you take the wrong step and all of a sudden you're stuck with medical bills.
Well, it's funny, especially with what you're mentioning in terms of Uber and all that. I can imagine for a lay person, that's just a legal nightmare to try to dissect all that.
Yeah, especially if you're a young guy, especially you're an immigrant, maybe English isn't your first language. All of a sudden you're taking food from a restaurant to your customer. You get hit by a car while on a bicycle, and then you get taken away to the hospital. How are you supposed to know what to do and how to find who's supposed to pay for your medical bills? A lot of people get scared. A lot of people get nervous. A lot of people just don't pursue because they're afraid. But there's a mechanism by law to pay for those medical bills and to make sure you can get the treatment that you need after you've been injured in an accident. But to really know and to do it right, you have to seek legal help, because you can't do it yourself. It's almost trying to navigate the legal system in a personal injury case, in your own personal injury case, is really like trying to do surgery on yourself, even if you are a doctor. It's not a good idea.
Right. Yeah. Even the best surgeon can't do it on themselves. What are some of the holdups in terms of insurance that may limit or deny auto wreck claims in New York State?
One of the biggest issues you'll see in New York State with limitations in coverage is a situation where the driver that hits you has inadequate coverage to cover the damages that he did. For example, if you have somebody who, if you're a decent driver and you're a decent person and you have good insurance limits and you're hit by somebody who has basic liability insurance, which in New York is 25 over 50, which means the insurance policy covers $25,000 per person with a maximum of $50,000 per accident. So it's up to $25,000 for each individual. And all of a sudden you have these terrible and horrific injuries. Well, we have a problem, right? That's why New York affords somewhat of a remedy, which means that in every insurance policy, there's a provision called SUM, which is an acronym that stands for Supplemental Underinsured Motorist Benefits. What that means is, say you're, a decent person, you have high insurance limits, there's usually a clause in your insurance policy that says, in fact, it's mandatory that you have a clause, or you at least have the option to have a clause that says if you're hit by somebody who has lesser insurance than you, you can look to your own insurance company to make up for the difference between what they have and what the insurance policy that you've paid for. So, for example, if you have one of the common scenarios you'll see is someone will be hit by a car and the car only has $25,000 in insurance. Okay, your own personal coverage or somebody in your household, maybe an older person like your dad, has coverage on their vehicle of $100,000 or $250,000. Well, you can settle for the $25,000 with the initial person who hit you, and then go back and look to your own insurance company for the SUM or Supplemental Underinsured Motorist for the difference between, say, the $25,000, $100,000, or $250,000. So when you get into an accident, it is actually important to look at your own coverages. And if you have high coverage, you want to put that insurance company on notice as soon as possible so they don't try and disclaim and say, oh, no, you waited too long or you didn't give us reasonable notice of the claim or that sort of thing. So, it's like they say in the fight game, protect yourself at all times.
So, Michael, as we wrap up, how does your experience in handling personal injury claims in New York help your clients? When
you come to me, you're getting somebody who knows what to do. I have over 20 years of experience. I could handle one of these cases in my sleep. I know the ins, I know the outs. I can see 5 moves ahead of what's going to happen before it even happens. It's almost like playing chess. I know based on 1 or 2 moves, I know how the rest of it's going to unfold. So you want somebody with that experience, background to be able to guide you, explain it to you, and make sure you just get it right from the get-go. Now, you're not stuck with medical bills, or you're not stuck in a situation where you don't have insurance and you can't get treated. You want things done right. You want to be in capable and experienced hands.
It's a great point to wrap up on. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Trial Talk, insights from legal expert Michael Joseph. For more information or to connect with Michael, visit newyorktriallawyers.org. Michael, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.